after divorce. My elder sister introduced me to an older brother who was divorced and had a son. He was rather ordinary looking. But his son was extremely handsome, giving off the feeling of a little prince from ancient Europe. However, there was something wrong with his son. No one could say exactly what the problem was. Roughly speaking, he had a bit of a suicidal tendency and couldn't be left alone. My sister said that the older brother worked on ships at sea and could earn about $1 million on a year. But he could only go home twice a year. And each time it was only about 10 days. If we could get married, he would send all the money he earned back to me. As long as I could take good care of his son and prevent anything from happening to him. My first meeting with William was at a Sichuan cuisine restaurant downstairs of my company. He was wearing a royal blue sweatshirt. A man in his late 30s had a thick and sturdy frame, with a crew cut. His appearance was not outstanding, but he looked clean and neat. Before he came, my sister had shown me his photo and told me the basic situation. 38 years old, with an annual salary of $1 million, divorced, and had a 15-year-old son in the key high school of the city. The son had a suicidal tendency. May I ask why you and your ex-wife got divorced? William smiled sheepishly, revealing 2 deep dimples. His teeth were white and neat. To be honest, I've been married 3 times. I was stunned. My sister hadn't told me this. Getting divorced once may be due to emotional discord or being apart too much. But 2 or 3 times. The problem is different. Could he be prone to domestic violence? Or after marriage? He is unwilling to hand over his salary, and only wants to deceive people to take care of his son for him? I sized up the older brother 10 years older than me in front of me. Judging from his appearance, he seemed very mild and honest. Especially when he smiled. There was a silly air. My son was born to my first wife. Her family is well off. At that time, I only earned more than 3,000 yuan a month. Her parents introduced her to a boss again. So he was forced to get divorced. The older brother rubbed his hands. A blush spread over his wheat-colored skin. His eyes were fixed on the dishes on the plate in front of him. He was so embarrassed that he didn't dare to look up at me. Generally speaking, if a man is bullied like this, he must hate his ex-wife's family thoroughly. Now that he has economic strength, he should be proud to think that the other party is blind. But looking at this older brother, not only did he not have hatred, but when he talked about it, he was quite self-abased. Could his latter 2 divorces be related to his ex-wife? Have the 2 been in an ambiguous relationship? Maybe there is also a large amount of unclear economic transactions? Your first wife is very beautiful. Huh? I've seen a photo of your son. He looks like a mixed race. I was embarrassed to ask directly why the latter 2 got divorced. Judging from the situation, maybe there is a drama of a white moonlight or something. The smile on the older brother's face was a bit awkward. He only said, "Others all say she is beautiful. Don't you think so?" He shook his head. "I don't have much aesthetic sense and I'm a bit face blind. I don't like staring at faces." When the dishes came, we ate a little. Then I asked him again, "Why did the first 2 end? Tell me. Let me see if I can accept it." At this time, his originally flushed face turned a bit pale. His lips trembled twice. When he took a bite of meat, half of his teeth bit on his own lip. My son. After pondering for a long time over a sentence, finally he put down his chopsticks and sighed. "It's useless to hide it from you. My son has some psychological problems." "I know. He has a suicidal tendency. Right?" "Yeah." He nodded. "Because of this, someone has to keep an eye on him all the time. But now he is in his rebellious adolescence, and he is very disgusted by others staring at him. William really isn't picky about women." My sister also told him my basic situation. 28 years old. With an unstable monthly salary of 3,000 yuan. I like writing manuscripts. I got divorced after 2 years of marriage with my ex-husband due to a long-term Cold War. I have no children. Then let's get to know each other first. I was quite satisfied with the older brother. In addition to his high salary that could allow me to stay at home and write manuscripts. There are not many men who look for reasons in themselves after divorce. He gives the feeling of being a bit silly but can support a family. Actually, I think you are very good. You are a down-to-earth person who lives a life. The older brother lowered his eyes and smiled shyly. Only then did I notice that he had very long eyelashes and the corners of his eyes were curved upward. A man in his late 30s. Except for his wheat-colored skin. Had few wrinkles on his face. How can you tell just from having a meal? I found it amusing. He handed me a tissue. While scanning the code to pay the bill, he analyzed it for me. Your hands are clean, and you don't have long nails. You don't speak aggressively and consider problems from both sides. Also, when you praised my ex-wife as beautiful, you didn't have any emotions. After saying that, he shook his phone screen. It was the payment interface. 79 yuan. We haven't established a relationship yet. It's reasonable to go Dutch for the meal. Without him saying anything more. I understood this action. Immediately, I took out my phone and was about to add him as a friend and transfer the money. But I saw him put his phone away again and rub his hands together. This store is owned by my friend. He said that for the first time. Someone brought a blind date to his store and ate such one cuisine that cost less than 100 yuan even if they ate until they were stuffed. This man was so keen in observing details. He wasn't as silly as he seemed. I couldn't help but look at him again. Well, if you also think we can get along, I'll take you home to meet my son these 2 days to see if you can accept it. After he finished speaking, he hesitated for a moment. It was obvious that he was a bit nervous. His brows were deeply furrowed and he couldn't help but emphasize. I really think you are very good. If it works out, I'll give you 1 million yuan as betrothal gift first, and then 50,000 yuan for you to use. Tomorrow. It's just the weekend. After exchanging contact information with William, I returned to the company and told my sister about the situation. Everything else was fine. The way the older brother was very nervous every time he mentioned his son made me vaguely puzzled. With such economic conditions here, let alone one son, even if there were two, few people would mind. Although the child has some problems. He is already a high school student. There is no need to worry too much about his daily life. At most, just keep a closer eye on him. Sister, how much do you know about William's son? Does he very much reject his stepmother? Like William, my sister couldn't explain this matter clearly. He doesn't reject her. In short, you'll know when you see him. He is a bit rebellious. Don't be frightened. Does he hit people? No, he doesn't do that. 3. I'm not in a hurry to get married at all. But I'm so curious about how a 15-year-old high school student with suicidal tendencies scared away the first two stepmothers. Early the next morning, I bought some gifts and drove to the villa area with the best environment in the city center with William. This is a key school district, right? I bought it for Michael's schooling before. At that time, it was quite cheap here. His name is Michael? Yeah. His grandfather gave him this name. The car stopped in the garage attached to the villa. William took me in. It's a bit messy. I cleaned it once yesterday. A rough man isn't so meticulous. I stood beside the shoe cabinet in the entrance. I put on the new women's slippers that William handed me and scanned the room with my eyes. It was quite clean. It was just that things weren't very neatly arranged and were a bit messy. Michael refuses to hire an aunt. Usually, you may have to put up with tidying up. He only takes care of his own room. High school students have little rest time. It's a rare weekend. At this point, Michael hasn't gotten up yet. I sat on the sofa and chatted with William. I asked him several times about the reason for his suicide. William also couldn't explain this matter clearly. To sum up, there was no warning sign. No conflict. Afterward, Michael wouldn't say anything either. So I require him not to close his door at home. The door lock of the bathroom in his room has also been removed by me. There are all-round monitors installed in the room. afraid that I would mind. He quickly shook his head and waved his hands to explain. There are no monitors in our room. They are all for him. Although this was the case, I still felt a bit uncomfortable. A 15-year-old teenager is not a child. He has no absolute private space and lives under the monitoring of his family without any privacy. Thinking about it is quite suffocating. Doesn't he have any objections? He is very obedient. As long as I say it a few more times, he is willing to listen. Just when I was wondering what such an obedient child could do, there came slow footsteps from upstairs. Looking up, I saw a boy wearing a white t-shirt and gray shorts rubbing his somewhat long tousled hair on top of his head, half opening his eyes. He walked down the stairs. Just like what I saw in the photo. This child was extremely good-looking. Unlike his father's wheat-colored skin tanned by the wind and sun, he had fair skin, except for the color of his eyes. He looked very much like a little prince from ancient Europe. Your hair is so long and you don't know to go and get it cut. There's no look of a student. Got it. I'll go and cut it in the afternoon. Unlike when he was with me. When he was nervous and shy. When facing his son, William immediately put on a parental air. After saying that, he felt that he should not give his child face in front of me. Quickly pulling up the corners of his mouth, he introduced. This is you. He got stuck for a moment. I quickly rescued the situation. Evelyn. Just call me Aunt Evelyn. Aunt Evelyn. 15-year-old children are rebellious and are more likely to reject the role of a stepmother. I thought I would be made things difficult or at least be met with a cold stare. But Michael was very obedient. He seemed more calm and generous than William. His gaze was constantly on me. And the longest time was spent looking at my face. Is Aunt Evelyn going to marry my dad? At noon, we booked a private room in a hotel. William went to order dishes. Michael sat opposite me, propping his chin with one hand and looking at me with his eyelids half drooped. He had very long and thick eyelashes. Just like William. Well, we had a good chat. Today I mainly want to hear your opinion. I don't agree. But if no one is watching me, he can't go on board at ease. So I can only agree. You are very straightforward. You say what you mean. This is very good. You'd better be mentally prepared. That is my home. I won't change my living habits just because one more person lives in. Unlike when William was present. When William was away, the obedience on Michael would disappear and become sharp and strong. But this alone isn't enough to make the stepmother's divorce. Right? How's the chat going? William came back, holding 3 bottles of yogurt in his hand. He put a bottle in front of each of us. Looking at Michael, he said, Your Aunt Evelyn is a nice person. We are going to get the marriage certificate as soon as possible. Michael stared at me with an ambiguous meaning, and showed a slightly gloomy smile. Yes, there are always people who make wrong choices for money, then suffer for this choice and finally flee in panic. Michael. Okay. I won't say any more. Michael opened the yogurt and took a sip. Suddenly, he handed the bottle he had drunk to me. When William saw this, he was about to scold him for being impolite. I calmly exchanged this bottle in front of William and then took the unopened bottle, unscrewed it and took a sip. His provocation was so easy to understand that I didn't have to take the bait. On Monday, a working day, William and I hurriedly got the marriage certificate and moved our luggage into the new home. In fact, William should have gone to sea long ago, just because he couldn't find someone to take care of Michael. He had been delayed for so long. If it was any later, he would miss the season. Now most of the time on the ship there is a signal, but there are also sea areas where we can't get in touch. I'll tell you in advance then. Don't worry too much about other things about Michael. He is fine on his own. Just go and check on his situation every 2 hours. Especially at night. If he does something excessive, tell me and I'll call, then scold him. This child is still obedient. Don't be afraid at that time. On the way to send William to board the ship, he explained everything in detail. The heavy luggage on his body kept sliding down. I wanted to help him. But he waved his hand to stop me from exerting myself. He didn't look like a man with an annual salary of 1 million at all. He was as down to earth as a dock worker with a difficult life. I remember everything you said. Be careful on the ship. I will pay attention to Michael's situation at all times. Don't worry. The roar of a large fishing boat drove away from the coastline. I looked into the distance and suddenly felt a bit of heartache. This 1 million is not a small amount for people like us, who earn 3,000 yuan a month. But it is also earned by him drifting in dangerous sea areas year after year in exchange for his life. I have seen his closet. They are all labor clothes worth 100 yuan. They are washed until they fade and deform. As long as they are not torn, he still wears them. I believe Michael sees all this. So even in his rebellious period, he is very obedient in front of William. But what about after William leaves and in front of me? On the way back, I couldn't help thinking about this question. 5-day students don't have evening self-study. When I got home, I saw warm light coming out from the second floor in the distance. Michael had come home from school. Just as I opened the door and entered the house, he came down from the second floor, probably to get ice water from the refrigerator. He was still holding a transparent kettle in his hand. It was an ordinary encounter. But at the first sight of him, I was so frightened that I stood still in a daze and almost turned around and ran away. Michael was completely naked. He was completely nude at home. At 15, he is not a child anymore. Although his skeleton has the slimness of a teenager, he is also tall and straight. If not for his age, he is almost no different from an adult male in his 20s. Sorry. Well, I'll wait for you to go back to your room. I quickly turned around and faced away from him, secretly blaming myself for coming home at the wrong time. Or I should send him a message in advance, so that he knows I'm coming home and be prepared in advance. It's okay. Unexpectedly, a calm sneer came from behind. Michael was not as nervous as I was. The slippers on his feet stepped across the living room calmly, and walked to the refrigerator to pour ice water into the kettle. You'll get used to it. This is how I am at home. What? It took me a long time to react. Did he mean that even if there was a stepmother present, he liked to run around naked at home? Just arriving here, deep down I naturally had the nervousness of being a dependent. And I also knew that I was an outsider. Okay. Then I'll try not to look. Look. It doesn't cost you money. Bad for the eyes. Probably because this made him unhappy. He didn't say anything. The footsteps going upstairs were a little faster. When I heard the footsteps enter the room, I turned around to change my slippers. By the way, I sent a message to William. Your son just invited me to watch a bodybuilding show. It seems that he is very confident about his figure. It's a good thing. When the network is good, William can see all the pictures except our room through the monitor. 5 minutes later, I received a reply. Don't be afraid. I'll scold him. 15 minutes later, my door was knocked on. Michael stood at the door with a sullen face, propping one hand on the door frame. With a somewhat leaning forward meaning, he gritted his teeth and said, "Did you complain about me to my dad?" Not really. He can also see through the monitor. Knowing to put on a pair of shorts before coming over to question me, I was very relieved. You can wear whatever you want. I'm just sharing life with my husband. Did he scold you? The intention of confrontation was too obvious. Michael was in the wrong. He glanced at me with the corner of his eye and turned around and left with a wave of his hand. Do you want to have dinner at night? Just seeing you makes me full. That's good. Look at me a few more times so that I don't have to cook. As William had told me, I would go to check on Michael's situation every 2 hours to make sure that if he had any problems, they could be found within the rescue time. Michael was obviously unhappy about this. But he had promised William not to close the door. No matter how unhappy he was, he could only endure it. During the day, he went to school. At home, I used an empty room to set up an antique study. Then I nestled in it and wrote manuscripts. I took a picture of the arranged study and showed it to William. His hearty laughter came from the sea over there. carrying the fierce sun and salty sea breeze, making my mood broaden. I've always liked Chinese-style studies. It's a pity that I don't have the heart to decorate. Can I also play elegantly when I go back? Waiting for my husband to come home to taste tea and burn incense. Very good. Very good. If there is anything you need to buy and can't move it, hire someone to help or order Michael to do it. Don't tire yourself out. He gave careful instructions one by one. I responded a few words. There was no more conversation as the signal over there was not good. After hanging up the video and looking back, outside the open study door, Michael was wearing school uniform and leaning against the door frame, looking at me. He sneered coldly and turned and went back to his room. 6. Do you want to have dinner at night? I chased after him. He was taking off his school uniform. He glanced at me sideways and continued to take it off without caring. It's okay. You can starve me to death too. I watched him take off his school uniform, with one hand on the only black shorts on his body. He was competing with me between taking off and not taking off. Somehow, I found it a bit funny in my heart. I don't dare. There is already enough resentment if he doesn't die. What shall we eat? How about scrambled eggs with tomatoes, minced meat noodles, and a stir-fried pork? I didn't know what was wrong with these dishes. There was a trace of surprise in his eyes as he looked at me. Then he frowned and became flustered. He quickly covered it up and I didn't ask any more questions. These dishes were all his favorites. I had asked William in advance. I wasn't targeting Michael. On the contrary, I wanted to please him so that we could get along well in the future. But obviously it wasn't easy. There was a very high wall in this child's heart. Seemingly obedient and at ease. In fact, he was repressed and exclusive, like a constantly burning volcano. I didn't know when it would erupt. There was a lot of silence between us. When we opened our mouths, we would not be polite and would argue with each other. After having a meal, I went back to my room to take a bath and sleep. Michael would always study until around 2 o'clock. Then he would curl up on his small pure black bed and fall asleep like an abandoned kitten. We got along peacefully like this for 1 or 2 months. Except for having a meal at night. The high school student didn't need me to take care of anything. I had a lot of free time. Considering that he had a hard time at school, I said that I would help him wash clothes and tidy up his room. He would always look at me with a disgusted and nauseated look and say, "If you dare to touch my things, I'll take them and throw them away immediately." Since it was like this, I simply didn't care anymore and let him tell me when he needed it. On the first day I came here, following William's suggestion, I set an alarm clock that rang once every 2 hours. In the past, I was always woken up by the alarm clock. But not this day. It wasn't late at night yet. I had just fallen asleep for a while and wasn't very stable. In my sleep, I could always hear bursts of screams faintly coming into my ears. At first, I thought I was dreaming. After slowly waking up, I realized that the sound came from home. Was Michael watching some horror movie to relieve stress? After listening carefully, I also heard some strange panting sounds. I was very sleepy. If it was an ordinary child, I would just go on sleeping. But Michael was different. I was afraid that something would happen to him, so I could only get dressed and go out to check the situation. Who knew that this glance almost left me with a lifelong psychological shadow? Michael's room door was still open, with only his study lamp on. On the computer in front of him were some extremely disgusting and violent pictures. The poor woman inside was screaming heartbreak. In front of such pictures, Michael was nestled in the chair, with his back to the door. His feet were stacked on the table. He was actually doing something that shouldn't be seen by others. He seemed to know that I had come. But he remained unmoved. I vaguely heard a provocative chuckle from his throat. William didn't give him a private space. He had promised not to close the door. Even at this time, he didn't close it. I was extremely shocked. I should have turned around and left. But my footsteps were heavy and nailed to the ground. The whole person was like a piece of wood and couldn't move. until nearly 10 minutes later. He finished. Without looking back, he said, "It's not 2 hours yet. Right? Did it wake you up? Well, your computer sound is a bit loud." I didn't know how I could talk to him calmly. Encountering such a thing should have been mostly embarrassing, but I felt extremely cold all over because of those videos on his computer. 7. I finally knew why William's first two wives divorced and why they could give up the life of getting $1 million a year and being lazy at home. A 15-year-old teenager watched bloody and extreme violent pictures to relieve his desires. He felt excited in front of such horror. This was too terrifying. In front of me was not a stepson, but a gradually forming violent criminal, a potential executioner who might swing a butcher's knife at any time. "Why? Do you like watching this kind of thing?" He was surprised that I didn't run away in panic. But it was only for an instant. After pulling up his pants, he turned to look at me. The blush between his eyebrows and eyes hadn't dissipated yet, adorned with madness. "Don't you think that some people in this world deserve to be treated like this? It's a pity that I can't do it myself. Otherwise, I would have more ruthless means." The night wind was blowing against the window that wasn't closed tightly. The whimpering wind sounded like the ghosts in hell crying, making Michael's face, half bright and half dark, even more sinister. "The way you vent your emotions. Well, I can probably understand." I really didn't expect that I would still have the courage to walk into his room and sit down on the carpet beside his bed. Looking up at his slightly puzzled eyes. "Can you tell me who your target is?" "Of course. I will keep it secret." He sneered and raised his hand to point at the camera above my head. "Keep it secret? I have no secrets." He had no privacy. For him, every moment was like being naked. "You know what? I hate women. All women." He stared at me. The intense resentment in his eyes was very terrifying. His fingers gripping the edge of the table turned white from exertion. Every word was emphasized as he gritted his teeth. "They all deserve to die." Surrounded by the surging black emotions, I was momentarily at a loss. Because he said all. But the word used was not, "you all but they." That is to say, I haven't been included in his deserving to die list yet. "Because of your biological mother? You think she abandoned you? So you hate her? Do you?" After hesitating, I still asked, "Have you also been abused by your stepmother?" This time Michael didn't answer. There was no telling what storm was hidden in his deep eyes. They were calm and deep to the point of being terrifying. He didn't look like a teenager. The first time I saw him coming downstairs without clothes, there was a not very obvious white scar on the chest of the child with a slender skeleton, stretching from the shoulder to the abdomen. Looking closely now, there were many scars on his body. Young people heal well. They are all just white like in Evelyn's and blend with his fair skin. "Go back and sleep. You talk so much in the middle of the night." He was almost admitting it. He turned his head to the side and stopped staring at me. His eyelashes drooped to cover his sight, forming a protective wall. "I'm afraid you'll commit suicide. Then stay and sleep with me?" "No. No. No. I'm even more afraid that you'll kill me." I quickly got up and left waving my hand. At the door, I was still worried. "I'm going back. If you want to talk, you can call me. There is no monitor in my room." William didn't tell me the truth. Or maybe it's my fault for not asking thoroughly and being fooled by his 2 sentences. There must be more problems between him and the latter two women. There is a time difference at sea. When I sent him a message, he was still working. It was an hour later before he had time to reply. William didn't want to mention these things. Only when I forced him to ask, did he have to tell the hidden Ruth of that year. After divorcing Michael's mother, William and the child had a period of living on the streets, and even having no food to eat. That year Michael was 5 years old. His grandma had died early and his grandpa had just passed away. William took the child with him and drove and delivered goods for others. To save money on hotels, they basically lived in the car. In winter, the broken van leaked air and the child got sick every few days. There was no way. He wanted to take the child to find the child's grandparents and see if they could help take care of the child for a winter. That was the first time Michael had seen his mother and grandparents since he could remember. When he went there, he was extremely happy. He picked out his favorite clothes from a pile of ragged clothes, and also picked a lot of snacks at the grocery store to give to them as gifts. William also thought that since the child was so sensible, they would definitely be very happy if they could cultivate their relationship. The child's mother could contact the child more in the future. But no one expected the result. They not only drove the two of them out and refused to admit that Michael was the child of that woman by any means. They also trampled all the gifts that Michael had carefully selected and warned William, "If you dare to come and cause trouble again, I will sell this child." On that day, 5-year-old Michael squatted silently among the goods in the van. On that day, William, who was deeply remorseful, had a car accident due to being absent-minded. After a long time after the violent impact, little Michael climbed out from the mess on the ground. Enduring the pain of a fractured shoulder, he helplessly tried to pull his unconscious father out. But he was too small. He couldn't even open the distorted car door. He didn't know who to ask for help. He could only run back to the woman's house that didn't recognize him according to his memory and knelt and begged that family to save William. He shed tears and didn't dare to cry out. He kept saying, "I will definitely repay you. Please. I only have my dad." He went at the wrong time. Just when his mother's newly remarried big boss came to pick her up, the grandparents were panicked. Seeing that they couldn't drive him away even with mops and chairs, the grandpa hit him hard on the back with a chair, grabbing the arm on the side where his shoulder was fractured. He dragged him out of the community and threw him into the stinky ditch outside. No one knows how Michael, who couldn't swim, climbed out of the stinky water. No one knows how much pain he was in, only knowing that he begged people one by one on the road and finally saved William's life. Since then, the words "mom" and "mother" have never appeared in his mouth again. 9 later, it was also my mistake. William thought that if there was someone at home who could take care of Michael, he could rent a cheaper house and let the mother and son stay in the rental house. At least they wouldn't have to live in the car with him. When William was young, he was as fair as Michael and quite attractive. Someone introduced a woman who had returned from a big city to him. Without thinking, he agreed. Did she abuse Michael? I see there are many old scars on his body. Well, Michael has never told me. Michael was just in elementary school. He didn't know what marriage meant. He only knew that when that woman was at home, William would have a hot meal when he came back. When he left, he wouldn't worry about him. She was one way in front of me and another way in front of the child. But I didn't notice it at all until Michael was seriously injured and bleeding nonstop. He ran to ask the neighbors for help and was sent to the hospital by the big brother next door. Only then did I know that she used to sell her body in a big city and was found out. When she came back, she couldn't get married no matter what. Marrying me was also out of necessity. Forcing herself to marry a man she looked down on and still having to take care of his little burden. For a prostitute who is used to living a wealthy life outside, one can imagine how much resentment is in her heart with nowhere to vent. After that, William found a job on a ship. An old master saw that he was down to earth and hardworking, and was willing to teach him hand in hand. But without someone to take care of Michael, how could he be at ease leaving home for more than half a year? That woman also heard that the income on the ship was high and refused to divorce. She knelt down and begged William to give her a chance and promised that she would definitely be good to Michael and would never hit the child again. As a result, the harvest was not good that year. The ship had problems and missed the season. Everyone didn't turn any money and returned home dejectedly. Did she file for divorce after returning home? She went crazy and smashed all the things at home. If I hadn't protected him, a whole kettle of boiling water would have been poured all over Michael. William didn't elaborate on the matter of the kettle of boiling water. It wasn't until later when I saw him changing clothes that I saw the large area of burns on his back. Then, what about the latter one? How? Originally I wanted William to tell me clearly all at once. But suddenly there was a storm over there. The signal was like the seawater being rolled up and thrown down by the sea breeze. It was intermittent and couldn't form a complete sentence. Then the call was cut off. You want to know how my previous stepmother got divorced? The sudden teenage voice startled me. In order to always pay attention to Michael's movements, I wouldn't close my door tightly when resting. I would leave a small gap. At this time, Michael was standing in the gap outside the door. There was teasing and sarcastic laughter in his tone. Obviously, he had been quietly eavesdropping outside for a long time. I'll just tell you directly. After all, I am the one who knows the truth. 10. He eavesdropped on my phone call without permission but didn't enter my room without permission. He knocked on the door twice. Can I come in? Yes. Only after getting my affirmative reply did Michael push open the door. With his fingertips holding a bottle of cold Coke, he casually nestled into the sofa beside my bed in a lazy and relaxed posture. You've been at my house for almost a month, right? It's been more than a month. I remember you had 2 monthly exams. The teacher said you made great progress and might be able to enter the sprint class next year. You even joined my class parent group? Michael smiled with an ambiguous meaning. With rejection and nausea. He turned his head to hide the emotions flashing in his eyes. His eyelashes also trembled slightly. I pretended not to see it. Your dad is not at home. These are all things I should be concerned about. Someone has to reply to the received, in the group, in the quiet night. Only the wind occasionally swept across the window, slapping the messy reflection of branches outside on the glass. She, like you, was also introduced by others. She used to work as a receptionist in the maintenance center in the community. He was silent for a long time and slowly raised his head, looking at the ordinary round ceiling light. At that time, we had some money and had already bought this house. My dad gave her similar conditions as he gave you. As long as she could take good care of me, he would hand over all his salary to her. That woman was very different when she first entered the house. She was very enthusiastic in pleasing the father and son of the Williams, making the 2 wandering men experience the warmth of family for the first time. That should have been the most cheerful period for Michael. It was precisely because of the beauty of that period that Michael made astonishing progress in his studies, and jumped from the bottom student in the bottom class to the top few in the top class. But the hardships of this father and son didn't end there. Such a beautiful life only lasted for less than 2 years. On that day, when Michael came home from school, he heard her talking on the phone with William. The words she said were very unpleasant. It seemed that because William's income that year was only more than $800,000, which was different from what he had promised her. Junior high school students already had a complete concept of money. He didn't think they needed to spend so much money at home. So he secretly observed that woman's consumption behavior. He searched for the items in the woman's room with his mobile phone. He not only found a large number of light luxury items worth tens of thousands of yuan but also found many receipts. Nail art for more than 1,000 yuan. Hairstyles for more than 2,000 yuan. Even a meal for more than 5,000 yuan. And plastic surgery bills for tens of thousands of yuan. Michael was furious at that time and hurriedly told William about this. But William was honest and had no temper. He always liked to be considerate of others. He thought that although this woman spent a lot of money, she was good to the child, and had never mistreated Michael. He said, "People will be more carefree when they suddenly have money. It's like the mentality of a nouveau rich. It's okay. Dad has already established his business channels now. In the future, he won't only earn this much." What William said was right. Although that woman spent a lot of money, she had never mistreated Michael. It could even be said that she was extremely caring. Even Michael's underwear and socks were personally picked by her. So although Michael was angry, he didn't really think about doing anything, until his 3rd year of junior high school. I was sitting on the bed reading a book at that time. Suddenly, in the middle of his words, Michael stood up and approached me, with one leg kneeling on the edge of the bed. He leaned over and stared directly into my eyes. He took my right hand and placed it on his neck, then slowly moved it down to his chest and abdomen. Middle and high school is the developmental stage for boys. Michael had a tall and straight posture. Apart from the youthfulness of a teenager, he was clearly a man emitting light and heat. He still wanted to move it down further. Realizing the danger, I panicked and pulled my hand back. She was just like this, taking my hand and placing it on her own body, leading me to caress her, and then suddenly pulled down my pants. He didn't continue speaking the rest of the words. Seeing the disgusted and repulsed look in his eyes, I could understand what had happened. That woman had developed feelings for her stepson, and did the most inappropriate thing, leaving an indelible psychological shadow on a child in the third year of junior high school forever. Why did she leave later? Because of what you saw today. Because she found those tools hoarded under my bed. Because she knew that I wasn't even afraid of death. Except for this house. William was determined not to give up. That woman left cursing, and took away all the valuable things and ran away with her tail between her legs. Outside, it didn't know when it started to rain. The temperature in the room became very low. I looked at Michael. Just like the way he looked at me. His eyes were empty, numb, and without any emotion. I was listening to someone else's story. He was telling someone else's story. Why are you suddenly willing to tell me? You can pretend to be in any way you think is beneficial for survival. Whether it's a harmonious relationship between mother and child or a peaceful life. Telling you is to warn you. If you want to live a good life, be honest. Well, I remember. I didn't refute his hostility. I nodded faintly. Go to sleep. After the holidays, your stepmother will take you to take revenge. Do I need you? I can't stand being bullied. Your father and you, with your style of enduring in silence, can suffocate me. Michael thought I was just saying it casually. Unexpectedly, at 6 o'clock in the morning on the first day of the weekend, I dragged him out of bed and took an intercity bus directly to the address where his biological mother was. Are you crazy? Evelyn, do I need you to help me take revenge? Please have some basic respect for your stepmother. Call me Aunt Evelyn. Otherwise, I'll tell your dad. If this mess wasn't properly resolved, Michael's deep-seated hatred would always be a time bomb. No one knew when it would explode. Two grown men can be bullied like this. Really? 12 Zhang Cheng Enterprise. The boss is John Datum. The boss to whom Michael's biological mother remarried mainly engages in health products and low-end skincare products business. Although the enterprise is not large, it makes a lot of profits every year. It cheats customers, employees, and suppliers. It's full of lawsuits. I took Michael directly to Zhang Cheng's competitor company and asked to see their boss. Except for socializing, the bosses of small enterprises are basically in the office. I sent him several documents I collected overnight, and got the contact information of John Dating and Michael's biological mother from him. Michael was completely confused the whole time. It wasn't until I sent a message to his biological mother on the bus back to the city that he rubbed his newly grown hair and asked, "How on earth did you find all these things?" People in our personnel department have their own query system. As long as there is a photo and a name, it's enough to find a large amount of useful information in various personnel groups. For such a company, employees will definitely back up incriminating materials when they leave to ensure they can get their final salary after leaving. Fortunately, I not only bought the chat screenshots of John Dating having his employees deceive suppliers and customers, but also got his revealing photos with his mistress in the office. After returning home, things were peaceful for a few days. While Michael was at school, I was always paying attention to the current situation of Zhang Cheng Company. Sure enough, in less than a month, the local news public account released a video. Zhang Dacheng's wife caught him cheating in the office on the spot. The two fought in public and were both hospitalized. A few days later, because the supplier terminated the cooperation, Zhang Cheng Company defaulted on delivery. Not only did it lose its most important customer, but also had to pay a large amount of liquidated damages. The bank immediately terminated the cooperation when it's meld trouble. Zhang Dacheng couldn't even get a loan to survive. In contrast, with the collapse of Zhang Cheng, the business of the competitor company soared. It took all the customers in its hands. It was only a matter of time for Zhang Cheng to die. How is it? Are you relieved? I took Michael to a restaurant to improve our lives and passed all the collected information to him, behind the steam of the large bowl of pickled fish and boiled meat. Michael lowered his eyelids and was silent for a long time. Finally, he nodded. His voice was a bit hoarse. Eat. Don't let it get cold. He didn't say words of thanks and didn't change his confrontational attitude when talking to me. But at home, he would wear loose home clothes and no longer wander around in just a pair of shorts. You don't need me to get information about your two stepmothers from your dad anymore. Right? Send it to me. What are you planning to do again? I'm bored. Looking for some excitement. It could be seen that Michael was hating deep down, even though it had passed. On the surface, he found me annoying. But at night, he still sent all the information about those two women to my phone. 13 There was no need to take revenge on Michael's first stepmother. I had someone take a video and send it to him. It was a darkened damp room less than 30 square meters. A 40-year-old woman looked like she was in her 50s. She sat on the bed haggard-lie. She forced a smile at the camera and made an alluring gesture. The person taking the video asked, "How much?" She said, "40. Are you sick?" "I've been treated. I'm cured." "Really? 30 is also fine. Don't leave in a hurry." The woman's bed was in a mess. It didn't look like she was cured at all. Even through the screen, it seemed as if one could smell the disgusting smell in the room. In the end, she paid the price for her choice and embarked on a road of no return that seemed like sugar but was actually full of glass shards. "Michael, do you believe that evil will be punished?" I looked at Michael, who was lying by the riverbank with empty and dazed eyes. He moved his lips but didn't answer. He looked into the distance at the orange setting sun in the sky, as if looking at a song and dance that was about to end. "It doesn't matter. You will believe it." I sent him another document. This document was about the current situation of his second stepmother. A woman who originally earned 3,000 yuan a month suddenly had an annual income of 1 million. Her quality of life was rapidly elevated. Luxury brands, high-end cuisine, perfect beauty and plastic surgery, magnificent residence. When the plane was soaring 10,000 meters in the air and suddenly ran out of fuel, there was only an inevitable fall. In just over a year, that woman's credit cards and all kinds of online loans exploded. She owed more than 1,080,000 yuan. Her private photos were sent everywhere. She was also beaten and hospitalized by debt collectors many times. Michael, sometimes hatred doesn't need extreme means to be resolved. Although you have long lost contact with them, they are all silently watching you. You living well is more painful for them than killing them. Don't preach to me. Then let's talk about something practical. Your dad will come back early this year. On New Year's Day, we will go to the Pacific Ocean to pick him up. We will play by the sea for a few days and then go home. When other children hear that their dads are coming home early, and the whole family can go out and play together, they must be beaming with joy. But Michael seemed worried. He just casually hummed and didn't eat much for dinner. Not only him. When I video chatted with William at night, the man on the other side also smiled very reluctantly. The whole person was like an old ship washed by the sea. He frowned listlessly. His words were all careful and pleasing. "How long can you rest this time?" "Maybe. For a long time. Until the beginning of the year." There was a lump in his throat. The corners of his eyes were a bit red. It wasn't very obvious on his wheat-colored skin. The smile on the corner of his mouth was uglier than crying. "Did you suffer any grievance?" "No. Who can give me grievance on the ship? It's just that the wind and waves are a bit stronger." "Then it's settled. Michael and I will go to the sea to pick you up on New Year's Day." Oh, good." He absently agreed twice, making an excuse that he had to go out of the cabin to take a look. He cut off the video. 14 In the following period of time, the father and son were exactly the same. They were both like eggplants beaten by frost. Michael's tone of confronting me became soft. Occasionally, he would help me clean the public areas. When passing by a fried chicken shop on his way home, he would bring me chicken racks. Seriously. The attitudes of you father and son are like being caught red-handed after going warring in a group. Michael bit the chopsticks so hard that it creaked. Evelyn. Can you say something proper? Call me Aunt Evelyn. Or call me Mom. There is no word Mom in my dictionary. Give up. In a flash. It was before New Year's Day. I packed a few thick winter clothes and daily necessities. Michael took 2 days off in advance. The two of us dragged our suitcases and went to the port to take a cheap small yacht booked in advance. According to the plan, we would meet William, who was supplying the fishing boat at the nearest port outside. Then we would take the fishing boat he was driving back and experience life on the fishing boat. William was absent-minded during this period. The signal was not very good either. It wasn't until we sent him a message after boarding the small yacht that he was startled and sent us a video. Michael. Aunt Evelyn. You really set off? Yes. We're on the yacht. We agreed to pick you up at sea. Forgot? I waved with Michael to him through the video. William forced a smile and wiped his face. Why don't you two have a good time? Then take the yacht back later. Life on the fishing boat is very hard. I'm afraid. This time we're here to experience the hardship. Right. Michael. I patted Michael on the shoulder, ignoring the supercilious look he gave when he turned his head. I continued to say to William, the child wants to see his dad. I want to see my husband. What's there to be afraid of hardship? The William on the other end of the video kept rubbing his face and hands. A man in his late 30s smiled like a shy and timid fool. After smiling, he quickly fell into melancholy again. The corners of his eyes began to turn red again. There seemed to be something stuck in his throat. He kept making swallowing movements. Seeing his appearance, Michael beside him blinked. He got up and said he was going to the bathroom. Then he ran away like he was fleeing. Then okay. I won't talk to you anymore. You're busy. Call us when you dock. The winter sea breeze carried a salty and cool feeling. 3 days later, we finally met William at the small port. He was wearing a dark green raincoat. He took me and Michael to eat a meal of grilled fish in the nearest restaurant. When it was time to board the ship, he took off the raincoat and gave it to me. He carefully buttoned it up for me. It's windy outside. Umbrellas won't hold. Don't catch a cold in the rain. It's just a few steps. Besides, why aren't you too afraid of catching a cold? We are both tough and not afraid of the cold. William is about 10 years older than me. He takes care of me even more carefully than he takes care of Michael. There was a gap in the wooden pedal on the ship. Afraid that I might step into it, he insisted on carrying me on his back. The crew on the ship laughed at him. William can't wait to worship his new wife. Although it was a joke. After laughing, the faces of several crew members became dejected again. Some sighed faintly as they walked away. Some shook their heads while wiping their faces. What's wrong with everyone? We are about to go home and reunite. Why does everyone seem so sad? No. Nothing. It's just that everyone is tired. You. Don't think too much. 15 life on a fishing boat is not as good as on a yacht. But William has his own small single room. Before coming to pick us up, he had tidied it up clean and neat. Michael went to squeeze into the dormitory with the crew and left the independent space for us. We got caught in the rain when boarding the ship. William was changing clothes in a corner. The water droplets on his hair slid down along his tightly muscled back and stopped at his lower back. Like a vessel holding wine slightly tilted, pouring the mellow wine into the hidden space below the man. I'll help you wipe it later. I got up and took the towel from his hand and rubbed the skin on his back. At this moment, I saw the old scald on his back that had already healed and countless scars of various sizes. The steaming heat from the man rolled over, carrying a reassuring aura. I stroked those wounds and asked him, did it hurt a lot at that time? No. It was okay. Unlike Michael. No matter what he had experienced, he seemed to have no complaints and never complained. He just lived a life that was not peaceful in silence. Okay. Okay. You rest first. I'll come back as soon as I finish handling things. His back tensed up and stiffened. Suddenly, he held my hand, quickly put on his clothes, and left the cabin like he was escaping. I only saw blush spread over his wheat-colored skin. Even the tips of his ears were red. I couldn't help secretly smiling for a long time. It wasn't until I was half asleep and half awake that William finally came back. The wind and waves at night were very strong. The fishing boat rose and fell and swayed. He hugged me from behind and rested his head on my shoulder. He wrapped us tightly with a quilt. Like many couples who met through blind dates, there is a lack of emotional foundation between us. It's more about first impressions and a bit of mutual assessment and preference. So being close together is not so intimate. But after being close for a long time, some changes naturally occur. His breathing became heavier and heavier. Afraid of being discovered, he turned over and faced away from me. I really like you, William. You are also very worthy of being liked. I turned over and hugged his waist and asked, "What about you? What do you think of me?" "Very good. I like you very much." He didn't expect me to be awake. His tone was a bit panicked. He turned around and wanted to hug me, but hesitated and was reluctant to get close. I don't know what his hesitation is. There is a faint sense of loss in my heart. I am not very lustful, but I also care about whether I am attractive in front of my husband. William has no physical problems, but he refuses to have an intimate relationship with me. This is a great blow to me. We have both been divorced and are not little girls who need to preserve our chastity. Even if we were, we are now legally married. Go to sleep. I looked up and kissed the corner of his mouth. A wry smile appeared. I turned over and said nothing more. 16 William. William. Get up quickly and take a look. There are big waves. Close to the country's border. Everyone thought they could go home and reunite safely. Unexpectedly, something changed in the early hours of the morning. The fishing boat was tossed high by the waves. The sound of the wind and waves outside was like the wailing of 10,000 ghosts. Stay inside and don't go out. William quickly wrapped himself in clothes and went to check the situation. Inside, I was tossed up and down. I could also feel the danger at this moment, but I couldn't help. I could only silently hope that nothing would happen. I didn't hear that there would be a storm at night. I don't know. There may be something under the ship. Be careful. Tie up all the ropes. Hurry up and go back to the cabin after finishing. The waves are coming. Outside were the heart-nicking shouts of the crew. As the ship rose and fell in the big waves, the sounds were sometimes clear and sometimes faint. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. A loud metallic impact. I heard a voice say, "Damn it. The door of the cargo hold has been knocked open." Hussein. Didn't you lock it? Quick. Save the cargo hold. That's all our harvest. Shut up. Who has the time? When we boarded the ship, William took me and Michael to visit this fishing boat. We all knew where the door of the cargo hold was. I pushed open the small door and came out. Sure enough, I saw Michael tying a rope around himself, preparing to go out and close the cargo hold door. "Give me the rope. I'll go. Don't make trouble." I ignored his gnashing expression and snatched the rope and tied it around myself. "You can control the length of the rope for me at this end." Michael couldn't argue with me and didn't have time to argue with me. I took a lock from the wall and turned around and rushed into the wind and waves. "Evelyn." William was steering the ship above. When he saw me rushing out in a single piece of clothing, he was so frightened that he almost lost his soul and shouted, "Michael, quickly pull your mom back. Don't listen to him. Let out the rope." Fortunately, Michael knew my temperament. He obediently held the rope at the end and slowly lowered me to a position close to the cargo hold door. The fishing boat in the wind and waves was like a madman. Even if I held on firmly, I still got bruises all over. But in an emergency, I didn't feel the pain. I struggled to close the hatch door and locked it with a lock while facing all kinds of strange marine fish cargo. "Okay. Pull me." Just when I was about to ask Michael to pull me back, an unexpected situation occurred. A huge wave swept over and engulfed the entire fishing boat in the wave. With such great force, Michael couldn't hold the rope at all. I was washed off the deck by the waves and fell off the ship's railing. Mom! Amid the covering of seawater, I heard Michael's heart-rending shout. I must have misheard. There is no word mom in that guy's dictionary. With a wry smile, I just took it as him calling me. I pulled the rope around my waist and tightly grasped the railing of the ship and responded, I'm fine. Take care of yourself first. Don't be thrown out. Fortunately, there was a breathing time after a wave. Michael pulled the rope hard and pulled me onto the deck from the side. Then some crew members who had finished handling their matters came to help and quickly pulled me back into the cabin. After the ship passed through the wind and waves, William stumbled down from above and hugged me tightly in his arms. So tightly that it seemed as if he was going to crush my bones. I felt the trembling of the man. His hands and feet were ice cold. When he buried his head on my shoulder, there was warmth falling into my shoulder socket. Do you know that if you fall down in this situation, you can't be retrieved? Okay. I'm fine. Aren't I? 17 this time. It's really thanks to William's wife. That's our. Originally. This trip. Say less. Who's San? This dog. Can't you be more careful? I've told you so many times and you still don't remember to lock the door. After the wind and waves subsided, no one could sleep. 1/3 of the fish cargo in the cargo hold was lost. A crew member raised his hand and wiped his face. It seemed as if he was about to cry. William sat silently beside me with his head bowed. One hand tightly held me. His eyelashes drooped to cover his expression, but couldn't cover the thin redness outside. Michael buried his head in his arms. I poked his shoulder and deliberately teased him and said, I heard someone calling Mom outside. Was it you? He turned around and faced away from me without saying a word. Call again. I don't mind if you call me old. Hurry up. After listening, I'll go catch up on sleep. Aren't you waiting for your dad to find you a younger and prettier stepmother? Mom. All right. Evelyn. If you say any more, I'll go home and overturn your study. That awkward teenager finally couldn't bear it anymore. He lifted his head from his arm and glared at me angrily. But the fair skin on his face and red eyes like the morning glow in the sky. It really had no deterrence. Looking at it, he was like a pitiful puppy. When I laughed, the whole cabin laughed along. When we got off the ship at the port, William and the crew went to unload the goods and divide the money. I took Michael and went to book a homestay first. When it was almost dark, William carried the heavy luggage on his back, held up his mobile phone for navigation, and rode a shared bike over. Seeing that he was very tired, I quickly went forward with Michael to help him take the luggage. Why didn't you take a taxi? He held my hand in his palm, handed the luggage to Michael, and casually said, It's not far. Taking a taxi still requires waiting. Even a fool could see that he was reluctant to spend money. His excuse was not bad, but I was too lazy to expose him. Take a break and have a meal. I ordered takeout. I don't want to go out. Oh, good. It was very quiet here at night. The sound of the waves was neither too far nor too close. Just right. It made people feel very peaceful inside. There was some light music playing in the homestay room. I wrapped myself in a quilt and wrote manuscripts on my mobile phone. William took a long time to take a shower. When he came out, he was wrapped in water vapor. His eyebrows were lowered, and the muscles on his body didn't seem to relax. Seeing that you are in a bad mood. What's wrong? He walked to the bed. I sat up straight and hugged his waist and rubbed my face on his tied tibias. Don't. He gently lifted my chin and pushed me away. I have something to tell you. Seeing his serious look, I became nervous too. In fact, this time when we went to sea, he sat on the edge of the bed with his head bowed. He swallowed. It seemed as if there was something stuck in his throat. That is, This time we may not have earned not much money. As he spoke, the corners of his eyes became a little red again. His slender and rough fingers were intertwined, and turned white from exertion. He looked like a prisoner confessing his crime. I know. You returned early. And a lot of fish were lost on the way. It must not be as much as before. Not only is it not as much. This time, we only divided about 50 or 60,000. He was like a panicked bird caught in the hunter's encirclement, facing a formidable enemy and treading on thin ice. He was completely tense. Suddenly, he tightly held my wrist. Evelyn, I promise this is only once. Next year will be fine. At the beginning of the year, I can earn as much as before. What I promised you will not change. 18 on the day of our marriage. William gave me 1,050,000 yuan and promised that there would be an income of 1 million yuan every year for me to control as long as I took good care of Michael for him. I looked at this man in front of me. I saw his panic and nervousness. I saw his caution. I thought of his closet full of cheap clothes. To save a few dollars on taxi fares, he would rather carry the luggage on his back and ride a shared bike. William, do you know how long 1,500,000 yuan is enough for an ordinary family to spend? I know. He didn't know. His hands were shaking. He didn't dare to hold me anymore. He even lowered his head and buried it in his palms. He needed this 1 million annual salary, so much. He wanted to use this money to keep a relationship and a family. I seemed to be able to hear the mournful cry in his heart. 10 years. His back stiffened. Under normal expenses. It can last for 10 years. I said. What are you worried about? Even if there is only 50 or 60,000 yuan in income in these 6 months. It is also the normal income of an ordinary family. I hugged him and dropped the trembling and tense body of the man in my arms. You have done your best. Michael is also working very hard. He can get the first place in the class in every monthly exam. You have given me a very reassuring home. Suddenly, there was a hurried and messy sound of footsteps outside the room door and then fading away. I guessed it was Michael, who was eavesdropping at the door. He knew that William would tell me about the income. When William was going to come home early, he wasn't very happy. Presumably, he was also worried about money. Aunt Evelyn, will you leave? William still hadn't relaxed. But there were glimmers in his eyes. He looked at me carefully, holding that bit of hope. I held his face and looked at this man who had been worn down by years. He should have been quite handsome when he was young. Now he is just a bit darker, with some scars and marks of time on his face. William, don't buy feelings with money. Don't even try to exchange money for a family. I like you. I can see your hard work and efforts. If I don't like you, or if you deliberately mistreat me, even if you give me 1 million yuan every year, I still can't stay. Aunt Evelyn. The sea breeze at night was very strong and cool. But the people around were as hot as a stove. The fullness and sense of security wrapped in his arms were fascinating. Years had taken away the sunshine from William. But he himself emitted brilliance. After being washed and precipitated by the sea, he was as heavy as a gem. After a stormy night, he didn't seem to know what tiredness was. Before falling asleep, I complained in a daze. I thought you looked down on me and didn't want to touch me. How could that be? I've always wanted to. When you were on the ship, you ran faster than a rabbit, afraid that I would eat you. The man was silent for a long time, until I thought he wouldn't respond and was about to fall asleep. A sigh came faintly from my ear. I didn't earn money. I thought you would leave. I didn't want you to feel that you suffered a loss. Fool. Extra Chapter 1. The two of them were too crazy at night. When they woke up, it was almost afternoon the next day. I suddenly sat up, startling William beside me. What's wrong? It's 3 o'clock. We haven't taken care of Michael for a whole night and half a day. When people relax their vigilance, accidents are most likely to happen. Once he has the thought of suicide at night. After so much time has passed, There is no chance of rescue. When William heard this, he also panicked. The two of us quickly put on a thick bathrobe from the hotel and rushed to Michael's room in a hurry. This homestay is a suite. The two-room doors face each other. There is a living room in the middle. Today, Michael closed the door. In the short distance passing through the living room, our hearts almost jumped out of our throats. Fortunately, the door was not locked. William twisted it open. The curtains were tightly closed. The room was dimly lit. Only a person lying on the soft big bed could be seen. The quilt only covered up to his waist. Michael! Michael! Wake up! Don't scare Dad. When William rushed to the bed, he almost tripped over the sports shoes on the ground. He threw himself on Michael and held his shoulder, shaking him vigorously and shouting loudly. I quickly opened the curtains to let the sunlight in so that I could check Michael's situation. Check his breathing. I'll call an ambulance now. Damn. Was there a tsunami or an earthquake? As a result, before I could finish speaking, a hoarse and hazy teenage voice sounded in William's arms. Michael wasn't fully awake yet. Shaken by William, his mind was in a mess. When he saw William, he was startled. He widened his eyes and grabbed William's collar, shouting hoarsely and flustered lie. Where's Evelyn? Did she run away? I'll go find her. I'll bring her back. He pushed William away and got out of bed. He was about to rush out to find me. Only when one leg landed on the ground did he find me standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. Looking at him like looking at a fool. Time seemed to stand still. He just froze by the bed like that. I am your stepmother. I am not a long-distance runner. Thank you for looking up to me. Don't panic. Don't panic. Your mom is here. Seeing that he was fine, William finally breathed a sigh of relief and patted his back to comfort him. Just as I was about to relax, suddenly a dark shadow rushed towards me. My waist suddenly tightened and I fell into a warm embrace. Michael didn't make a sound. He just hugged me tightly like this. He was taller than William. The boy was like a mountain. His muscles and bones were tense. It was as if he was holding something precious that had been lost and found again. Okay. Okay. I won't leave. Your dad and I didn't take care of you last night. We were afraid that something would happen to you. We were panicked today. William and I patted his back together to let him come back to his senses from the just nightmare. After several minutes, Michael finally calmed down. He let go of me and rubbed his face. Then he hugged me and William together again and mumbled something in a low voice. It seemed to be, Mom, our family should be together forever. Our family. This mom and the 5 words our family were so soft that they were almost inaudible. But it was like something hit the softest and loneliest corner of my heart. That's good. Just live on like this well. Extra chapter to Michael was very competitive. Later, he never had any suicidal tendencies again. At home, he also knew to dress properly and helped tidy up the house. No matter what I said, he always had to retort a few words. After retorting, he would still obediently listen. I was also happy to argue with him, and then see his face flushed with anger. Later, he was recommended to a first-class university, and chose the major of electrical engineering. I opened a flower shop near home. After figuring out the business, I changed to contracting fields to grow flowers for wholesale. In good seasons, I could earn for 500,000 yuan a year. The work at sea was hard and dangerous. In the year Michael graduated, I didn't let William go anymore. I handed over the fields to him to manage. I nestled in the flower shop and wrote manuscripts. Originally, I thought this was very good. As a result, William was better at doing business than me. He was honest and sincere. In less than half a year, the number of customers doubled. So he had to contract hundreds of acres of land to expand production. If I could have met your dad earlier, I would have saved 10 years of detours. Michael and I were each holding half an ice-cold watermelon and sitting under the big poplar tree by the field. Eating. This time he didn't retort me. Looking at the hot sun in the distance, there were twinkles in his eyes. There was a bittersweet and peaceful curve on the corner of his mouth. If he could have met William earlier, Michael's childhood should have been much happier. At least like an ordinary child. Mom. In my life, I only recognize you as my mom. Every time people hear that my son has graduated from college, they always praise me for looking young. What are you talking about that makes you laugh so happily? William came out of the greenhouse. He washed his hands in the bucket, as if looking for a sense of security. He habitually wrapped me in his arms. I scooped up a spoonful of ice-cold watermelon and put it in his mouth. Then I pushed him away a bit. It's so hot. It's really hot. But I want to hug you. Dad. Michael felt like a shiny light bulb. His face immediately fell. I know you to have a good relationship. Don't show off in front of single people. Okay? I'm convinced. No one is stopping you from finding a partner. When you pick someone good, Mom and Dad will go and propose marriage for you. I deliberately make two tiang sounds. Michael. Don't be in a hurry. Take your time. It's not like you're in a hurry to find someone to take care of your child. This sentence left William speechless. He blushed in embarrassment and chuckled twice. Then he took the watermelon from my arms and squatted aside to eat it.